Hey guys, Professor Philip Goff, what an honour. Great guy, renowned philosopher of mind, consciousness theorist, panpsychist. We unpack all of this and more in this conversation. But what a privilege to speak to Philip. He's one of those characters that makes philosophy cool, makes it accessible. He's one of the reasons that myself, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for a number of other Chelsofians, if that's a word, that he's inspired us to get back into philosophy and to just sort of see the magic in the world and in our experience of it. And what could possibly be more interesting than what the hell is going on, right? And Philip definitely gets that. We discuss God, Christianity, physics, mathematics. We get into. And this is just an all-round great guy. Thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope we can speak again.
Hey, Philip.
Hi, Matt. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's a real massive honor and privilege to have you. Myself and the group just we're extremely grateful for the work that you've done popularizing philosophy. The sort of non-materialistic stance is quite popular in our sort of group, and it's just brilliant to have you. So, I mean, could we start by just sort of getting a bit of background? Sort of how did what was the philosophical itch for you? What led to you pursuing philosophy? I know that you were also studying physics as well. So, how did you end up where you are?
Oh, thanks. Well, that's really lovely to hear. It's just great to get more and more people engaging with thinking about setting up communities around philosophy. And it's really an honor to be able to be some influence in that. Um, yeah, I guess I've always been obsessed with philosophy as far back as I can remember, really. I don't think I'm much good at much else, really. I was never that amazing academically. You said I studied physics. Actually, I didn't study, but I wish I had done, really. I mean, I guess I work a lot and talk a lot with physicists and try to get a grip on relevant physics as much as I can without having, a physics degree myself.
Hmm.
But yeah, I suppose it's always just been very naturally a desire to know how everything fits together, the different stories we tell about reality, about, the scientific story, and then what else do we tell about reality? Stories of values or mathematics, the story mathematicians tell of numbers and sets, or
Hmm.
talk of human agency, or talk of, most obviously for me, consciousness, feelings, experiences. How do all these different stories fit together?
Hmm.
Maybe they all collapse into the physics story at the end of the day, maybe, but that's a bit hard to make sense of how they can all squeeze into physics. And
Hmm.
if not, what else is the fundamental story? I don't know. That's always just kind of really driven me from an early
Hmm.
age.
Yeah, and you seem to have a sort of quite a deep respect for physics as well, and sort of you seem to have some support for the view that it's obviously describing some phenomena very well, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
so,
It's
so,
the
so
big it's the big question. I mean, I'm interested in the fundamental nature of reality. So obviously physics is the natural science. I'm probably more interested in physics than neuroscience, really, even though
Mhm.
I work in consciousness. Well, actually, when I was quite young, my parents sent me to Dr. Holden. I just remembered his name for some reason, a local physicist. And he sent me, he taught me through some physics books, and I was just asking questions like, but where does it all come from? Does God
Mhm.
exist? And I remember him saying, I think maybe you're talking to the wrong person. And I realized it wasn't exactly those kinds of questions, but I wish I
Mm.
had studied, at least studied. I didn't do mathematics A level. I wish I'd done that actually.
Mm.
I mean, I've learned more maths as I've gone along, just from particularly probability, the mathematics of probability. I'm working with a great philosopher, Kenny Boyce, at the moment, who's worked out a very detailed mathematical framework for thinking about evidence relevant to fine tuning.
Right,
So
right.
picked up more mathematics, and AI helps me with that these days.
Mm.
But
Mm.
but yeah, I wish I'd learned more physics
Yeah.
and mathematics to just fit it all together.
Does fine-tuning play a part within your thinking? I think you do reference, you do talk about it, don't you? So how, what is the role of that exactly within your system?
Absolutely. Particularly in my most recent book, Why the Purpose of the Universe, as it's modestly called. Well, I just think, I mean, this is a surprising discovery of modern physics that, at least according to our current theories, for life to be possible, certain numbers in physics had to, against incredible odds, fall in very narrow ranges.
Mm,
So it looks just sort of wildly improbable that we'd get the right numbers for life just by chance. I mean, I've always thought this needs explaining.
mm,
Um, and I used to think, the multiverse looked the more plausible
mm.
explanation.
With different
Um,
configurations of some of those numbers, essentially, right? Yeah.
yeah, if enough people win the lottery, if enough people play the lottery, someone's going to win.
Mm.
Well, actually, it was just going into the mathematics of probability. I don't know whether you want to go into this or not.
Yeah, why not?
It's
I
it's
like math.
yeah. So, well, let me tell you
Not very
where I'm
good
up
at it, but
to.
I like
Let me. Well, neither am I really. I've got about a bit of a clunky mind mathematics. I get it.
Mm,
I have to sort of take time to go through it. But look, I think there's something exciting here because I think there is something very important here that's mathematically demonstrable.
right, right.
Usually in philosophy, it's sort of intuition and it's a
Mm,
judgment call. But I do think there is something here that's just demonstrable, and that's quite exciting. And the seeds of this have been in the literature for 40 years, but in technical probability journals. And, I've been trying to get it out to a broader audience,
mm,
and it's quite exciting. I think there is cutting edge uh the boundaries of knowledge here as we're sort of
mm,
working out the mathematics, and it's not just a question of argument. But let me try and say what it is. So it's obviously it's satisfying with its maths because you can sort of settle it in some way.
yeah.
On the other hand, it's a bit hard to convey. Right, it's a bit of a nuance point. So in probability, in the mathematics of probability, which goes around Bayes'
Mm,
theorem, you can distinguish in the calculation between what you're taking for granted and what you're taking as evidence.
right.
So what you're taking for granted we call background knowledge. So I don't know what would be just silly, an obvious everyday example. If like our background knowledge is Matt turns up to do his podcast at 8 p.m. every Tuesday, and then our evidence is he hasn't turned up this week. So,
Yeah,
evidence is
yeah.
always against some kind of background.
Yes.
Now, if you think about the fact that our universe is fine-tuned for life, has the right numbers for life.
Mm,
If you put into the background knowledge that you're taking for granted that our universe exists, right? If you put that in the background, if you take that for granted that our universe exists,
yeah.
then the evidential support for a multiverse collapses. It
Right.
just evaporates. So
Mm,
that I think is mathematically demonstrable.
right. So
Paul Drake.
that dismisses the multiverse theory.
So it's slightly more nuanced than that. So what does that show? I didn't say there's no support for a multiverse.
Mm,
I said if you put in the background knowledge, what you're taking for granted, that our universe exists, then the support disappears. So what that
right.
shows is if there is support for a multiverse in this
Mm,
vicinity, it's not from the fact that our universe is fine tuned.
mm,
It's from the mere existence of our universe,
mm,
the mere fact that our universe exists. Because
right.
once you take that out of the evidence, it collapses. So it's a bit
Mm,
like, I'm trying to think of an analogy, talking to my wife about this. So suppose we were trying to decide, suppose there was someone who was attracted to you, Matt, and we were trying to decide whether that person was attracted to your gorgeous good looks or your wonderful dress sense. And so to figure it out, we might sort of dress you up in rags. So we take
mm,
the and if the attraction of this person then disappears, well, it wasn't your good looks. It
Yeah.
was the way you were dressing. So it's the same with the multiverse. If you take out of the evidence the mere existence, then the support collapses. So if there is evidence for a multiverse here, it's not, it's from the mere existence. Now you might think, sorry, we've got straight into the deep end here. You might think, how could the mere existence of our universe give us reason to think there's more universes? Well, it's actually pretty plausible from the way the mathematics of probability works. I mean, maybe an analogy, if there's four people in my family home, right? If you say, what's the likelihood Philip's at home? Well, if there's only one person at home, then it's 1 in 4. If there's 2 people at home, then it's 50-50. If there's 4 people at home, it's an episode. The more people there are, the more likely it is that this particular person's going to be there. And it sort of looks on the face of it like it works out the same. Like the more universes there are, the more likely it is that our universe exists. Okay. And then people debate whether there's something that cancels that out, because it does feel a bit weird that it's too easy that you'd have evidence for a multiverse just from the mere existence of our universe. But anyway, this is important because it's nothing to do with the fact that our universe is fine-tuned for life. And so if you're going to take into account all the evidence, maybe the mere existence of our universe supports a multiverse. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But then the fact that it's fine-tuned for life is distinct evidence. And so you have to, if you're going to explain that, it's going to be in terms of something else. And, the other most discussed candidate is something kind of goddish. So, So I think really where we might end up is we have evidence here for both God and a multiverse. The mere existence of our universe counts in favor of God. Sorry, in favor of multiverse. And then the fact that it's fine-tuned counts in favor of God. And so maybe the evidence points to both. But that's what I've been convinced is utterly demonstrable.
Right.
Is that if anything is evidence for multiverse, it's just the fact that our universe exists. And I'm debating this with just very finally on the social. So, I was quite pleased. Sean Carroll had a podcast recently responding to me on this. Phil Halper's YouTube channel had 3 philosophers responding. So I've got people discussing this that's been in the philosophy literature for decades, and no one's been talking about it, despite huge interest in God and the multiverse. And very finally,
doesn't it emerge from the interpretations of, just briefly, it doesn't? There's also support for it from interpretations of quantum mechanics as well, isn't there? Because of the superposition and so on, suggesting that these multiple events actually do occur somewhere.
Yes.
But also keen to understand how this sits within the Panpsychist program as well. How does this support your overarching position?
Good. Yeah. Sorry, that was a very long answer I gave my first answer. I promise not to. My head's been buzzing with this all week, actually, and going through.
Let it flow.
Kenny, I had a Zoom call with Kenny Boyce, and he taught me through 6 pages of mathematics, and it was anyway. But so there are set aside fine-tuning for a second. There are a couple of different points in physics that many physicists, some prominent physicists think to point to a multiverse. As you say, it's one interpretation of quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation. Again, Sean Carroll favors that. And I can see the case for that, actually. I don't ultimately agree with it. We could go into why, but there is a case for it. That there is a case that it's the simplest interpretation of quantum mechanics,
right? Okay.
Which sounds strange because it's like all these universes, but it's the only version of quantum mechanics that just has the Schrödinger equation, the kind of simplest bit of maths. That's the equation that has all the superpositions, the many cats living and dead if you're in Schrödinger's. Now, all the other versions of quantum mechanics have to add something else to get rid of. Okay, how come we only see one cat? We don't see many cats. Whereas many worlds says we don't need to add anything because all these possibilities exist. We're just branching away from them. Anyway, so I see the case for that. I don't ultimately buy it, but But actually, that doesn't help with fine tuning. Actually,
Right.
that's that kind of multiverse, as people like Sean Carroll will accept, because although the universe keeps branching, the laws of physics stay the same.
Right. Okay.
So, and the laws of physics, according to our current theories, are fine tuned. So you'll just get all of these branching universes will all be equally fine tuned. So that, but there is another version of the multiverse from inflationary cosmology,
Right.
which is the one some physicists think can deal with fine tuning, where you've got it's sort of this, you've kind of got a mega universe that's always really rapidly expanding, and then bubbles within it slow down, sometimes called bubble universes, and we're one of those bubbles. And people think when one of these new bubbles forms, when one of these new universe forms, the numbers change randomly. So actually, yeah, I mean, what has been very little discussed is there's all these technical probability theory issues that we've been talking about, the philosophers are dealing with, and then there's the science, and they hardly ever interact. Everything's so bloody specialized. I'm actually, if I may boast slightly, one of the few, I think the only philosopher I've come across who's really connected them up in my Y book, also in a paper in a philosophy journal. But yeah, that's what me and Kenny are thinking of writing a paper on, actually taking this complicated mathematical framework he's developed, and then but seeing how does that connect with the independent scientific case for the multiverse, and how does it fit in with panpsychism? That was your other question.
Yeah. Just briefly before you crack on with that, Philip, have you ever come across Olaf Stapledon?
Olaf Stapledon.
He wrote Star Maker and the first and last men, and it's just that in the end, when he gets to meet the sort of Godhead at the end of his kind of strange cosmic quest, which is brilliant, that very Godhead is creating all of these different universes with different tweaks. It's a freaking multiverse theory, you know.
Right.
And so I just want
that's
you just get a bit of a tingle there. That's good fact. You know, it's funny because a lot of people cite him as one of the founders of science fiction, but he said, no, 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 I'm not a science fiction writer. I'm a philosopher. This is, you know. So yeah, just a bit of a strange dotted line there.
I was just thinking, how do I know the name Olaf Stapledon? Well, my first permanent job was at University of Liverpool,
Right.
where I'm from Liverpool, but I left when I was 18, and just by chance applying everywhere, I ended up in Liverpool Uni for a few years, and their weekly speaker series was called the Stapledon series.
No way! Oh, fantastic!
Because named after Stapledon.
Yeah.
Was he from Liverpool, or was he?
I'm not sure, because it's quite an unusual name, isn't it, Olaf? But he is an English.
It was definitely named after him. But I can't remember now what the connection was to Liverpool philosophy department.
He was fairly well known as a philosopher, I think, and he was a conscientious objector in the First World War. But he wanted to embrace the historic kind of event, and he went out there in the ambulance corps, and he wrote about how they were kind of disrespected by the proper military, and the main military guys didn't want them in uniform and things like this. So yeah, fascinating character if you get the chance to. I know you're busy, but it's on. I'll give you a rec there.
No, I like the tip. Thanks for that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, God and the multiverse are not enemies necessarily, and well, John Leslie, the great philosopher who was one of the first philosophers getting onto the fine-tuning stuff. He's a wonderful book, Universes. And like me, he's a sort of very non-standard theist. He doesn't think God is fundamental, actually. He thinks he's an axiarchist. He thinks value created the universe, that there is some sort of fundamental, the universe exists because it is good.
Right. So
that's the bottom line. So it's not a brute fact, but nor is there a creator. It exists because it's good.
Wow.
But it's good to have lots of universes, and then lots of gods or pantheistic minds emerge or something. And it's infinite number of different. But he's a fascinating, very rigorous, interesting
Leslie. Right. Yeah, that's
John Leslie.
Yeah. So yeah, we were going to talk about how that stuff bears upon the panpsychist program, and and actually, just very briefly, I heard you talk on a podcast the other day. You were talking about how something like 33% of philosophers are now saying they're panpsychists. The Phil papers. It was the Phil papers study you referenced.
Oh no, not that they're panpsychists. That they're
non-materialists. They're non-materialists.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 52 physics. Well, this was 2020. I think it will be closer now. To be honest, I don't know when they're next planning to do this survey. This was 2020, it's 52% physicalist or materialist, 32% opposed, and then the others. So it's not quite Brexit, but it's a significant minority. And then, well, in this survey, 3/4 of the anti-physicalists were dualists and 1/4 panpsychists. So
Right.
it's very much the third position. But that was from in the survey before that, it was nothing. So I think it will. So it was sort of like the Liberal Democrats, or maybe the Green Party, or But I think it will be bigger still when it's the next.
So why is there a growth in this sort of are we going through a paradigm shift, sort of a la Kuhn? Is this are we in a crisis, a paradigm crisis?
I think I think more and more people are thinking you can't are feeling the challenge of explaining consciousness. So then we get people like my friend Keith Frankish saying, in some sense, it doesn't exist, at least in the way philosophers tend to think about it. You know, I mean, the vast majority of physicalists these days say you can't, you're never going to be able to give an intelligible explanation of the emergence of consciousness,
Right.
of the kind that you can give of. I like to give the example of the phase change of water from ice to liquid to steam. You know, if you go through the molecular story of that, the way the molecules are sort of rigidly bonded together, and then the kinetic energy rises and they loosen up. You get you see, I see now why it melts and why it becomes liquid and steam. Well, the vast majority of physicists accept you'll never be able to give that kind of intelligible story, because it's just such a conceptual chasm between consciousness and the concepts we use to describe our consciousness, subjective, qualitative, and the concepts we use to describe physical reality, kind of objective, quantitative, as Galileo appreciated at the start of the scientific revolution. So then they try to argue, we just don't need to. In the unique case of consciousness, you don't need to give an explanation. It's just brute identity, feelings of brain states. Whereas actually, I think most of the public who are interested in consciousness and the scientists think, like Anil Seth and Sean Carroll again, they think, no, we will one day give an intelligible explanation.
Yeah.
And so actually, if you put together the science, the physicalist scientists who think, we'll solve the hard problem, and then the physicalist philosophers who've realized that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Then you end up an anti-physicalist. But although sometimes I think progress is again slowed by how specialized everything is. It used to be like the philosophers of mind and the metaphysicians all sort of understood each other's work. But I think like metaphysicians have become separated, like from philosophy of mind, and are maybe still stuck in this sort of physicalist paradigm. Whereas the philosophers of mind who deal with the consciousness debate have sort of moved on a little bit from that, even though it's probably still the most popular position, but there's much more debate about it. It's complicated. I don't know. We should do another survey, see where we're up to.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of something Jenny Nielsen she was going on about the over specialization in physics, even that there are certain people who are so highly, they don't even know what other disciplines are talking about anymore. And there is something problematic about that, isn't there? There should be, you feel there should be a sort of unity across the, shared concepts, which reminds me of something else as well, because we're talking about physics and philosophy, and Tim Maudlin seems to sit in that space you were talking about. And he said something the other day that seems to sort of totally contradict something that you've suggested, if I may. You were talking about the fact that physics describes what things do as opposed to what they are, right? So that it's not really getting to grips with the fundamental. Whereas Maudlin does seem to, he offers that, he says, no, we should be talking about what this stuff is. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts on this, because where else can we go other than physics to show us something about the substrate that we're made from? Or we emerge from.
Yeah, I like Tim Maudlin. He doesn't like me.
Oh, he's a very straight talker. He's quite hard edged, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I like his work,
I,
because he wants to do proper metaphysics. He wants to know about reality. He's
mm,
frustrated when physicists have become too separated from what is reality.
mm, yeah.
He does get ludicrously angry in calm philosophical discussion. I'm sort of thinking,
Mm.
like, are we sort? As a bit of a, I was trying to give a
Offended his
vivid
mother or
example.
something. Yeah.
It's like sort of serious politics, and we're just talking about like fine tune.
Mm,
But I think God in particular really annoys him. And my
mm,
diagnosis, if I may, Tim could respond to this if he wants to. I think he, like me, he just thinks fine tuning obviously needs explaining,
mm,
and he can't bear the thought that it's not the multiverse.
yeah.
And we were just having a very intense discussion with this on Facebook. Uh,
So hang on, Tim Maudlin believes in the multiverse, does he?
Uh,
Right.
it might be a bit more nuanced than that, but
Mm,
he tends to put the multiverse down as an explanation of fine tuning. And I'm not sure he says definitely that, but he has supported that quite clearly in the way some scientists are a bit sort of seem to be saying that, but it's a bit unclear. He's
mm,
very clearly made. And then I've made this case that, look, you go through the mathematics, it sort of falls apart, and he just screams at me, selection effect, you don't understand selection effects. And I just keep saying, look, where does this maths go wrong? What do you say about these conditional
mm,
probabilities? And actually, well,
yeah.
I mean, what he was claiming to respond to me undermined the multiverse. Anyway, it's a
Is that
it's
in
too
some sense?
detailed, but it was
Mm,
just ridiculous. Just like such intense
yeah.
anger
Yeah.
about this. Anyway,
Passion. It's
I,
certainly
I,
passion.
I still like him, even though he seems to absolutely
Yeah, he's
despise me.
quite a
But
charismatic fellow, isn't he? It's quite interesting. It was sad to see his and Bernardo Kastrup's discussion fall apart so quickly.
oh, I
I would
saw that. Yeah.
love
Well,
to
Bernardo's another one who's,
can be.
I sort of feel like, I think his view is just panpsychism differently described.
Mm,
But
wow, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then he just, I mean, even if that's not true, they're pretty close. They're pretty
Mm,
close views. I sort of think we should be, you know,
mm.
God, he's just so intense that it's gotta be absolutely this on. He's written these angry blog posts about me that I've
Right.
changed my mind. And what I should have done is, like Bernardo, spent time working out the truth before
Mm,
I started writing. And it's just, come on, this is ridiculous. I like people disagreeing with me. I
mm,
like a community. I don't like this sort of strongman kind of, here's the
mm,
truth,
mm.
and I mean, I
Yeah.
like he's got a cool view. He's got a cool, but it's just, yeah, I don't like that sort of. So I'm not surprised to
Mm,
have ended up, but yeah.
yeah. So let's explore panpsychism. I mean, why panpsychism as opposed to idealism? So what is more convincing about that position for you? Because they do seem very closely
Sort of,
related. Yeah.
well, what is the difference? I mean, yeah, it depends what you mean by ideal. So if
Mm,
idealism is just, um, what is it? The fundamental level is consciousness, then panpsychism is a form of idealism. I mean, sometimes idealists tend to think that sort of physical reality is illusory or not fully real. Donald Hoffman is quite clear about that. Bernardo says these things about what's on the screen of perception. I'm always said, is that a
dashboard.
metaphor or is
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that dashboard? I think is Hoffman's thing.
Mm,
So I guess panpsychists tend to be more sort of robust about the reality of the physical world.
mm,
It's real. It's there. It's what physics is talking about. It's just made up of consciousness.
mm,
And I mean, another thing to clarify is panpsychists don't necessarily think it's little conscious particles. I mean, I
mm,
tend to talk like that for the sake of simplicity. I'm not as completely persuaded as Bernardo that particles are utterly ruled out, but there's no essential connection. One
mm,
dominant form of panpsychism is cosmopsychism, that the universe itself is the fundamental conscious mind. Not clear to me why Bernardo's view just isn't that. Once we drop the metaphor of what's on the screen of perception, just say It's the universe. The fundamental conscious mind is the universe. Physics captures its causal structure, but in terms of its underlying nature, it's it's a conscious mind. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I like, depends what you mean by idealism. If it's like George Berkeley's idealism were, well, it depends what you mean by different kinds of idealism.
Mm.
I suppose I like the idea that's a sort of middle way. It's close to physicalism. The physical world is really there,
Yeah.
but it brings in consciousness as a fundamental, as the fundamental underlying reality.
And you've proposed that it kind of solves the hard problem insofar as you don't have to account for the emergence of conscious from these, ingredients, if you like, because they are already conscious. So we are a configuration of existing conscious material, right? Or agential material, as Mike Levin might put it. I mean, do you think that Mike Levin's position offers support for panpsychism? Because oddly, I think it does. But during a conversation a few weeks ago, he said that he thinks some version of idealism is correct. But actually, I think he's actually offering up something that's closer to panpsychism, because he's saying that
Mm,
they're finding agency even in logical algorithms and things like this,
yeah, I
and so,
saw.
it's almost like this state of affairs. It's almost animism. We're now just saying, well, you know what, everything's alive, right? And given that we're continuous with absolutely everything around us, there's a certain dependency upon even distant galaxies and so on, behaviors and things there. So there is this sense in which we are, everything is everything almost. Don't know where that's going.
Yeah, yeah. No, good. So just on the hard problem, I tend not to use the word hard problem anymore because I think it sort of assume or seems to assume physicalism that we're starting with the
Yeah,
physical and
it
seeing
does,
how to
doesn't
get
it? Yeah.
not that's not quite what Chalmers
Mm,
meant, but I think that's the way most people take it. Whereas, yeah, I think panpsychism turns it upside down and says, rather than starting with the physical world and getting consciousness out, start with consciousness, see
mm,
if we can get physical reality out. And I think, the physicalist way of doing it, no one's ever made any progress. There's
mm,
pretty good reason to think it's incoherent. The other way around, I think we know how to make sense of that sort of mystery
mm.
solved.
Yeah.
So that's why panpsychism, but panpsychism, idealism, I'd rather just like talk about the specifics of the view and
True. Yeah.
Bernardo's stuff about um what's it called, sort of the multiple personality stuff is
Mm.
interesting. I don't
Isn't
think
it?
it
Yeah.
solves all the problems. I don't think we should think, oh, this is definitely the truth, but it's a cool idea in the mix.
Mm,
um yeah, Michael Levin, very interesting. Yeah, I hope to interact with him one day. I've never sort of
mm,
really interacted with him. I guess he's more on the empirical side of things. I'm more on the philosophical conceptual side of things.
mm,
But it's interesting how these things are starting to connect. I mean, I've explored in my Y book panagentialism, the sort of the crude forms of agency go all the way down. So yeah, I suppose, yeah, be interesting if people start to connect these things up. I suppose I do keep myself heavily in the more conceptual side of things, and guess
yeah.
it kind of go into, if I'm going to go into science, it's probably more thinking about physics, those
Yeah.
sort of fundamental questions of physics. Just because I don't know, just my kind of skill set, I
Mm,
suppose.
yeah.
But
But it's
yeah, so
encouraging to
someone
see. It's
someone cleverer
encouraging.
than me should
Mm.
try and connect those things up. Sorry, go on.
No, just briefly, I was just going to say it's encouraging to see the philosophy taking an active role in Mike Levin's work, though, and for him to actually face those sorts of inquiries into it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned Christianity. Have you got you sort of, didn't you say something like you're a non-theistic Christian or something? That's quite interesting. I mean, and I was going to, if we could tie that together with the question, is there a purpose to all this, Philip?
Yeah, I self-identify as a heretical Christian these days. Well, yeah, I suppose, well, circling back to where we started, what's the fine-tuning got to do with this?
Mm,
I suppose I'm convinced that in our standard mathematically precise ways of understanding how evidence works, this recent discovery of physics, the fine-tuning of physics for life, is evidence for some purpose, goal-directedness at the fundamental level. And I think we're a little bit in denial about that at the moment because it's not what we've got used to as thinking of as science. We've
Yeah.
thought, oh, science is ruled out, anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to, when you've got stuck in a way of thinking, it's hard to sort of follow the evidence. But yeah, so I suppose, so how do we make sense of that? I mean, and I guess this was the focus of my last book, the Why book. Especially now I've come convinced that you can't deal with it with a multiverse. So it's going to have to be something goddish. A lot of people would postulate a supernatural designer. But if you already think the universe is conscious, that opens up the possibility that maybe it has goals of its own. Maybe it's sort of fine-tuned itself. So that was kind of where I was heading in the Why book, sort of panpsychism as a kind of middle way between God and atheism. And then since then, I suppose the move to Christianity, just discovering the diversity of forms of Christianity, in particular the mystical traditions, how the Eastern Orthodox Church thinks about the core of Christianity. I always thought Christianity was, we're all sinners, we deserve to go to hell. Fortunately, Jesus is going to take the rap. If you accept that kind gift, you go to heaven. But what I've subsequently learned is, that was sort of, that version of Christianity was pretty much invented by the Protestant reformers 500 years ago. Doesn't go back to the start. The way the Eastern Church thinks about it, it's all about unity, oneness, God and humanity and the entire physical universe entering into unity. And this is how they understand the Jesus stuff. So this more mystical conception of Christianity resonates with me deeply, makes sense of mystical experiences I take very seriously. It fits with panpsychism. I think it fits with the sort of slightly non-standard forms of God that I was thinking of, and the fine-tuning. And so it all came together. I mean, I'm not a member of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but I have become a practicing Anglican. I suppose I've found my spiritual home combining the mysticism of the Eastern Church and the liberal flexibility of the Anglican Church. And I think, with a new book I'm working on, Heresy, is sort of part of it. Part of it is kind of how panpsychism can sort of bring together the scientific and the spiritual. But also part of it is talking to spiritual and not religious people, saying, look, I'm not saying this is the one true faith. All of this is very uncertain, but I'm just saying, look, there are things you can get out of religion, community, tradition, structure, and there are ways of engaging with it that maybe avoid the worries you might have, that, you can be very uncertain, you can be a bit heretical, take it all as a big metaphor, if you like. There's a physics professor in my church who doesn't believe any of it really, very spiritual person. So, I don't want to force anyone to do anything, but I just want people to be aware that that's an option, and that's where I've sort of found some joy. So that's my life
fascinating
story.
Because you ask 100 Christians a certain range of metaphysical questions, and they'll give you different answers, and they from the same church even. So it's not just one thing. It's not. It shouldn't be. You mentioned the mystical tradition. Does that include the Gnostics and things like that? And there's some sort of philosophical dotted lines to people like Rumi and the Sufi poets. And, there's some very similar kind of metaphysics amongst these thinkers.
I think everyone thinks of Christianity. So many people think of Christianity as sort of US evangelical Christianity. And look, I've got good friends who are evangelical. I don't want to say, oh, that's all terrible, and a lot of it's got wrapped up in MAGA and stuff. And anyway, but there's lots of different forms of Christianity. I mean, in my new book, I've been exploring the mystical traditions in all the Abrahamic faiths. You've got Kabbalah in Judaism, you've got Sufism in Islam. I've been looking at Ibn Arabi, who was, when was he now? It's a while since I finished this, 11th, 12th century, who thought even Allah is not God. sounds strange for a Muslim,
Mm.
because
So God is
God,
everything, right?
ultimate reality, well, sort of ultimate reality is totally beyond categorization, totally
Right,
unknowable.
right.
As soon as you relate to it, even to call it Allah,
Mm.
it's not really ultimate reality anymore. Anyway, yeah, the Gnostics,
Mm.
look, I mean, I want to take all these things very seriously. I suppose the Gnostics is another step. That's so the Eastern Church is sort of within the realm of Orthodox Christianity. It sounds heretical to Western Christians because it's about God and us becoming one. They say, God became like us so we can become gods with a
Mm.
small g. It's about units. It sounds heretical, but actually, this is still um, Orthodox Christianity. The Gnostics, I suppose, the difference is the Gnosticism, as I think of it, and as what we call Gnosticism covers lots of things. There's the Gospel of Thomas, only discovered less than 100 years ago. Absolutely fascinating text. But a lot of it is closer to Plato in thinking there's something substandard, inadequate about the physical universe. It's something to escape from. The soul is it's very dualistic. I actually prefer Orthodox Christianity, the idea that it's not about throwing away the physical universe. It's about saving the physical universe by bringing it together with God and the universe becoming one,
Mm.
becoming uh, full and completed. I actually prefer that in its mystical form, but I sort of personally prefer that. But look, I'm an open-minded guy. I'm interested in it. I'm not gonna kick someone out of my church because they're agnostic. Let's just, that's what I love about Anglican churches. No one's gonna sort of, well, depends which Anglican church you go to, but your average Anglican church, no one's going to sort of interrogate you on whether you've got all the right views, and you can mumble in the virgin birth bit of the creed or whatever.
Phil, I'm just a little bit conscious of time. Would it
Oh
be
yeah,
if we
sorry,
run through? No problem at all. Could we run through a few questions from some members?
yeah, sure.
Okay. So a first one here from Linton Cox. He says, If every particle has a tiny bit of consciousness, how do those micro consciousnesses combine to produce a unified, coherent experience like yours or mine?"
Well, this is the core challenge to panpsychism, isn't it? That this what's become known as the combination problem. Um, and different panpsychists will say different things. This is still a sort of emerging research program. Um, I mean, what I've been thinking a lot about recently is what some people call the co-consciousness relation. So I think panpsychism, starts with one's own consciousness that you're immediately aware of. But I think it's not just experiences, colors, sounds, smells, taste. There's a certain deep unity to our conscious experience. These different experiences are experienced as one. They are deeply unified. This is sometimes called the co-consciousness relation. They are experienced together. And in certain circumstances, this can become kind of fragmented in split brain cases. Maybe your consciousness can be kind of fragmented a little bit.
Yeah.
In principle, that could carry on. You could imagine, I don't know, your visual experiences become separated from all of your other experiences. And then the emotions become separated from the other sensory experiences. You're kind of just fragmenting. I suppose I would think if you just keep going, you'll get back to the consciousness of particles. I mean, if consciousness can fragment, then
Mm,
maybe we can put it back together again.
mm,
And I mean, I'm open to maybe adding some primitives in here. I'm not opposed to there being new forms of consciousness, maybe new forms of unity at higher levels. I mean, we want it as simple as possible, but you also can't forget that that to my mind, what is the central attraction of panpsychism is not so much explaining our consciousness; it's explaining physical reality. in terms of consciousness. So everything bottoms out in consciousness, turning the physicalist picture upside down. So even if we can't fully tell a totally reductionist story about human consciousness in terms of particle consciousness, even if you've got to have a bit of layering, a few extra primitives, still everything's bottoming out in consciousness. Physical reality is being explained in terms of consciousness. So I still think that's a very simple, elegant view of things. But yeah, it's a very important question.
Yeah, that's a fascinating answer. I'll have to go over that and sort of scratch my head a bit, but no, that's really interesting. Thank you. Um, Next one, actually from Linton, is if consciousness is a property of all matter, what testable predictions does that make? How, so it's almost like, is there a convergence across kind of physical science and philosophy here? You know, how could we ever tell if a rock or an electron is conscious in any meaningful way?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is the question I get asked most, really. And I think the annoying thing about consciousness is it's not publicly observable. Um, and that makes it utterly unique. Science is used to dealing with things you can't observe, but in all of the cases, you're theorizing about things you can't observe to explain what you can observe, the data of observation experiments. It's only in the case of consciousness that the thing we are trying to explain is not publicly knowable. We know about consciousness in a very different way through being conscious. We're directly aware of our feelings and experience. It's a fundamental data point in its own right. So we've really got, I mean, that's first base with consciousness. It's just a very unique thing in a scientific context. And because of that, there's limits to what you can establish experimentally.
Yeah.
You can't see it in the brain. You can ask somebody what they're feeling and scan their brains, and you can correlate. I think that's all you can do scientifically,
Yeah.
correlation. Scan people's brains, ask them what they're feeling, try and systematize, and then try and extrapolate beyond humans. That's all we can do. And that data just leaves open physicalism, panpsychism, dualism. People think physicalism, that's the scientific option. No, the science just gives us correlations.
Yeah.
And then we can just say, I don't know, why is consciousness correlated with brain activity? If you want to explain that, you've got to go beyond what the science can settle.
Yeah.
You've got to, is it physical realities first and consciousness emerges? Is it consciousness first, physical reality emerges? Are they both separate, as the dualist thinks? You get the same scientific data of correlations for all of those theories. Yeah. And that's annoying. And I understand why it's frustrating. I think we've just got to get used to the fact that you can't settle all questions with an experiment, and because consciousness is not publicly observable. So there isn't a test that can prove panpsychism, but there isn't a test that can prove physicalism. There isn't a test that can prove. So you could say, like my colleague Peter Vickers, philosopher of science, because of that, we should just say, I don't know. But don't say you're a physicalist. Why does no one say to physicalists, how do you test physicalism? No one ever says that. They say it to panpsychists. But anyway, that's my answer. Not very satisfying. But...
No, that's really interesting. But I suppose what that implies is that we are left with reason alone. And actually having to sort through the concept. I mean, because we can use reason to say, look, we know it's not made of bicycles, right? So there is this kind of gradation of sensibility, if you like, of the ideas. And so my question is, I suppose it's epistemology. Can reason unveil truths about the nature of reality? Oh, I hope so, because that's what we're in the business of, isn't it? But yeah, but how does it do that?
I think we need both, and I mean, I think any scientific question needs both to some extent. I mean, mathematics is pure reason. But with any science, there's always an infinite number of theories that could account for the data. And how do we slim them down? With things like simplicity, elegance. And especially when you get into theoretical physics, there's judgment calls about this is most obvious in quantum mechanics, where there's everyone agrees on the equations, but there's half a dozen different theories of what's going on in reality to make those equations work, or speculations about
Well,
the
it's
early
I find
universe.
physics so bewildering these days. It's just crazy. There's too much to know. I just can't,
Yeah,
Um,
it's very esoteric theories of reality,
yeah,
and
yeah.
there's lots of scope for judgment call. There's lots of disagreements, or I mean, think about ancient history. An analogy to ancient history. You don't like if you think all historians think Caesar crossed the Rubicon. No one said, "Well, what's the experiment that settles that?" We're sort of, it's not we can't it's not that easy, but we can make a rational case of inference to the best explanation. So
Yeah.
I think it's always going to be. I think that's how you should think about these issues in consciousness. It's inference to the best explanation. It's not free for all, but we've just got to get used to. We can't just say, "Here's the experiment. There's the answer." Something in between. But yeah, human beings can do this. We need to rediscover the importance of philosophy. We don't. I'm
Mhm.
not about telling physicists how to do their job or neuroscientists how to do their job. But when it comes to quantum mechanics, when it comes to consciousness, you need the philosophers there. You need both working together.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing, isn't it, when they do and it comes together.
And
Um,
people like Sean Carroll and Anil Seth,
mm,
who disagree with me on absolutely everything, but they understand that the importance of philosophy, the need for philosophies. That's why I think we have very
yeah,
productive discussions.
that's fantastic. Well, appreciate we've just done an hour there, so guess that's it. But
I mean, we're all right for 5 minutes. I think we did start a bit late, didn't we? If you
okay,
want to go, if you
okay,
want to
yeah.
go over a few minutes, it
I
was
mean,
my fault. I was 7 minutes late.
I
Gone.
I could go on all night really, but I was just curious, what kind of society, I mean, what kind of impact could it have on society? If we went over to a more of a sort of panpsychist view and sort of started, we see the world very differently, wouldn't we? If we occupied that metaphysic, if you like.
Yeah, something I've been thinking about more recently, actually. I mean, there's the connections to spiritual issues, which not I always want to emphasize. A lot of panpsychists don't like. A lot of panpsychists
Mm,
don't want go all this spiritual stuff. It's supposed
yeah,
to be proper science.
yeah.
But I think there is a consonance with certain spiritual convictions. I think it's easier to make sense of mystical experiences as genuine insights into the nature of reality if you're a panpsychist than if you're a physicalist. If you have a mystical experience, that one of the boxes you tick on the psychology study for are you having a mystical experience is, do you have a sense of a living presence in all things? um if you're a physicalist and you're
Mm,
having that experience, you've got to say it's an illusion. But if you're a panpsychist, it's at least an option to think
mm, yeah.
what you're experiencing in these mystical experiences is insight into the nature of reality. Um, as I said, with fine tuning, panpsychism gives you a nice godish, but not God,
Mm,
godish way of making sense of that. I mean, it's like panpsychism gets close to dualism in that it's taking consciousness as fundamental, but it's not postulating anything outside of the physical universe. Similarly, with fine tuning, panpsychism gets sort of close to godishness, or can do if you take fine tuning seriously, but it's not putting God outside of the universe. So it's got this sort of elegance and
mm,
simplicity of physicalism, but not trying to reduce everything to physics when it doesn't seem intelligible. But
mm,
yeah, although I mean, talked a lot in my book Galileo's Error about connection to the natural world is another
mm,
one that might become more important as we continue wrestling with the climate crisis. I think
mm,
if you think of trees and plants as conscious organisms, that adds a whole other ethical dimension. They have moral weight. And I don't think, as we walk through nature, I don't think anyone is a physicalist. Actually, as you walk through nature and
mm.
the way we relate to the natural world, most of us,
Yeah.
I don't think it fits with trees being mechanisms. I don't know.
Mm,
We think
yeah.
of them as being alive and
Mm.
of value in some sense that go I think that's hard for a physicalist to make sense of. Hugging a tree makes a lot more sense if you're a panpsychist. It's like it's a bit more like stroking a cat.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so they're two obvious ways I think you know, we should be thinking, is the view true, firstly, but it is something a little bit better for our mental and spiritual health if you're conscious beings in a conscious universe. It's a picture of reality we fit in with. It's nice.
It's beautiful in a way because, as you've often pointed out, it sort of brings those two worlds. So physics is our best bet for describing our,
Yes.
certainly our phenomenological experience of the world. And this builds on that, or it sits alongside it somehow and says, yeah, we're not questioning this. These things are phenomenally real, or objectively real, perhaps. But there's this consciousness. But so could I just try and get my head around the particle example, right? So the particle, so say a photon or electron or something, is there a field of consciousness around that? Or is it itself an example or a primitive form of consciousness? I don't quite
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, definitely the latter.
Right.
It's not a dualism that there's the
Mm.
physical particle with its physical properties
Mm.
um and then these other weird consciousness properties. As Sabine Hossenfelder had a blog post saying, "Oh, this would show up in our experiments," but that's not the view. It's the view is, look, physics doesn't tell us what an electron is.
Mm. Yeah.
Physics tells us what it does.
Yeah.
Physics isn't interested in what an electron is. It's just interested in what it does. It's
Yeah.
like playing chess when you don't really care what the pieces are made of. You just want to play the game.
Mm.
So panpsychists say, well,
Yeah.
we've got a theory of what it is that does the stuff you're telling us about,
Mm.
Mr. Physicist or Ms. Physicist or what have you. Um, you're not telling us what it is, it's telling us what it does. Here's a theory of what it is.
Yeah.
So so
So,
that's
so there's a conscious form there that manifests in such a way that we're able to observe certain properties that we can be measured and weighed. But the thing itself, if I may use that term, is a conscious agent of some sort.
I mean, agent is taking another
Mm.
step. I've in my Y book trying to make sense of this pan-agentialism where it is an agent. I increasingly take strong forms of free will seriously.
Mm.
But many other panpsychists, Annika Harris, and I think Ed Hassan Merck would be more in this direction. David Buelas, a young philosopher at Princeton who's a panpsychist, I think they would be more and disbelieving in the self, disbelieving in free will, maybe something in a more Eastern tradition. So that would be a further step. But yeah, a conscious thing, if you like, or maybe just, I mean, there's questions about, do you want to say it's a thing that has consciousness, or is it just pure consciousness? Um, different panpsychists will go different ways. Just as there's philosophical discussions about what is an object. Is it just a bundle of properties, or is there the thing that has the properties? And you have
Mm.
those discussions, whatever your philosophy, and panpsychists will have them as well, and come to slightly different forms of panpsychism. But yes, it's pure consciousness, nothing more. That's all there is.
Yeah. So how does this bear on personal identity then? I'm curious to know what's your position on that? Is there a real continuing Matt, for example, or not?
I mean, again, lots of my panpsychist buddies would say no, and I think panpsychists would disagree on this as much as
Mm.
anyone. I
Yeah.
suppose I'm a little bit more boringly Western and believing in the self and free will. Eastern stuff's a bit more sexy, isn't it? If you sort of, but why do I believe in the self? Yeah, I suppose I guess I'm not really convinced that there's a good argument that there isn't a self. And also Barry Dainton, I don't know if you come across, University of Liverpool, has some interesting stuff about the continuity of consciousness and how different conscious experiences overlap. Like if you think of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So I'm starting to sing now. Like the sort of the do and the re, kind of a one unified experience over time. The specious present, as William James called it, and then the
Yeah.
re and the me, and then the me and the so. So our experiences are sort of all overlapping, and
Fluidic almost.
I find it a bit hard to make sense of without a sort of continuous self. But
Mm,
I'm already thinking how philosophers, including panpsychists, would dispute
mm.
the argument I've just given. So um yeah,
Because
it's just all up for grabs.
because William James also said that thoughts are thinkers, didn't he? So it's sort of suggesting that there's some of the thoughts that we experience are actually agential within themselves. They're competing for maybe resources or attention or something like that, which is quite disturbing thought, isn't it? But it's certainly when you think about people who hear voices or unwanted thoughts and stuff like that, it gives it a kind of frame of reference that actually perhaps makes it more manageable. Because if
Yeah.
you've heard that there's certain therapies now focusing on, sorry, it's a little bit outside of our sphere, but certain therapies now focusing on dealing with these voices as though they are agents. And
All
it's
right.
actually been proving fairly successful.
That's very
Um,
interesting.
I've got a couple more questions if
Okay.
that's all right. Um,
Uh, maybe just another minute or so. Would that be all right? So okay.
yeah, sure. I'm just actually looking at these questions. I think you may have implicitly already answered them. I think you have actually. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little bit tired myself actually, Philip. I've had a really long and complicated week so far, and it's only Tuesday.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, it's all good. No, but no,
Well, I
that was
got.
fantastic. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you very much. It's been fun. I'd love to talk all night, but yeah, my little kids wake me up early, and I probably sort of need to wind down. Or I find it hard to sleep after these discussions. That's the only
Me
problem. I need
too.
to sort of watch some. I'm watching Severance. Have you watched
Severance.
Severance?
No, I haven't.
Everybody watch Severance.
Okay, what's this
Um,
about? Tell me about Severance.
oh, you got to watch this, man. It's anyone, everyone who is interested in this conversation will enjoy it. The premise is it's a company where they've taken the individual and isolated their memories during working life.
Right,
So the person outside of work life doesn't know and doesn't remember having any memories from when they're working,
right,
and the person working doesn't have any memories of their life outside of work.
right.
So they're sort of like two separate individuals.
Wow.
And anyway,
I've said
it's
one's
very
enslaved
interesting.
in the workplace and the other one enjoys the leisure time. Or-
Something like that. They sort of they're different people. I mean, it's connected to like a John Locke's theory of personal identity, where it's all to do
Mm,
with the memories, and so
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
really in a way exploring. Don't know whether this was intentional that theory because you get the idea that they're different people,
Yeah.
and one of them their wife has an affair with the version of them in work. And they're like, I can't believe you're cheating on me because they're sort of. I've given something away there, but anyway.
Which platform's it on?
I can't remember. We're illegally
Right.
downloading it. I shouldn't say that, should I? Could get arrested now. I think it's Apple TV.
Right, okay, brilliant.
It's
No, I'll
gonna
look
get
into that. I know
sued.
anything that's philosophical, philosophical entertainment, well done.
It's very good. It's very good.
Brilliant. Okay,
Just
well,
mention to people, seeing as you got a good, yeah, I'm starting to do my Substack quite seriously actually, and I might
right.
do some interviews on that and stuff. I'm just kind of thinking, do I want to start a podcast? And then
Mm.
I can't bring myself to the effort of starting a podcast.
For purely selfish
Brave
reasons,
men like you,
it would be
just
awesome if you did it. Please do it.
take so long. Well, I think I'm just gonna like maybe every month interview someone on my Substack and put the
Mm.
video up.
That'd be
Just
fantastic.
focus on my Substack. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
post more on my Substack and yeah.
I'll
Anyway,
get the link, stick the link down in the video description, all that stuff. But yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a great honor to have you, Philip.
oh,
Hopefully we can speak again.
thank you very much.
Take care.
Absolutely. Take care.
Speak
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye bye.